Hello everyone, welcome back to Learn Anesthesia Basics. I'm Dr. Kavyamita. Today, let's learn an interesting topic and a very important topic, that is cardiac reflexes. So, what are cardiac reflexes? These are fast acting reflex loops between heart and CNS. So, what do? They regulate the cardiac function, and they are helpful in the maintenance of physiologic homeostasis. So for any reflex, there should be receptors, the arc and everything. So let's see what are the receptors. There are two types of receptors, the cardiac and the extracardiac. The cardiac receptors are present in the atria, ventricles, pericardium and coronary arteries. And what about the extracardiac receptors? They are present in the great vessels and carotid artery. So let's see each reflex one by one. The first reflex is the baroreceptor reflex or the carotid sinus reflex. Baroreceptor or carotid sinus reflex. So what happens, or what is this baroreceptor reflex and what is it for? It is for the maintenance of blood pressure. I remember it as B for blood pressure. So this regulates through negative feedback loop. So what happens in the baroreceptor reflex? Let's assume there's a change in blood pressure. So the circumferential and longitudinal stretch receptors, circumferential and longitudinal stretch receptors present in the carotid sinus and aortic arch sense this change in the blood pressure and take this information through glossopharyngeal nerve and vagus nerve. These go to cardiovascular center of medulla. From here to nucleus solitarius. So in this cardiovascular center of medulla, there is the area responsible for increase in the blood pressure that is present laterally and rostrally located. And the area responsible for decrease in the blood pressure is located in the center and caudally. So this integrates impulses from the hypothalamus and limbic system. This carotid sinus here is involved in controlling heart rate, and the aortic arch regulates peripheral sympathetic outflow. So when there is a BP of more than, let's assume 170 by 100 mm of mercury, there is activation of stretch receptors, there is decreased in the sympathetic activity, resulting in decreased cardiac contractility, decreased heart rate and decreased vascular tone. There is activation of parasympathetic nervous system, which results in decrease in the heart rate and decreased myocardial contractility. This reverses the effects and there will be hypotension. You have to notice that there is decrease in the maximum decrease in the heart rate because of decrease in the sympathetic activity and activation of parasympathetic activity. This plays a major role during acute blood loss and shock. And one more thing to remember is this reflex arc loses its functional capacity when BP is less than 50 millimeters of mercury. Halothane, the inhalational agent in anesthesia, reduces this heart rate component of the reflex, decreases the heart rate component of the reflex. The calcium channel blockers, AC inhibitors and PDE inhibitors decreases the cardiovascular response of increasing the blood pressure. This is due to direct effects on peripheral vasculature and interference with the CNS signaling pathways. This is baroreceptor reflex. The next reflex is the chemoreceptor reflex. Chemoreceptor reflex. Chemoreceptor reflex, the name itself tells us there is something chemical or involvement of the chemical sensitive, chemosensitive cells in this. So, the chemosensitive cells are present in the carotid body and aortic body. With the changes in pH and blood oxygen tension, the chemosensitive cells detect this and sends the information to sinus nerve of Herring, that is the branch of glossopharyngeal nerve, and vagus nerve. This carotid body and aortic body responds at PaO2 of less than 50 millimeters of mercury acidosis. From here, it goes to chemosensitive area of medulla. This stimulates the respiratory center and increases the ventilator drive, and there is activation of parasympathetic nervous system, which results in decrease in the heart rate and decrease in the myocardial contractility. If there is persistent hypoxia, if there is persistent hypoxia, there is direct stimulation of the central nervous system leading to increased sympathetic activity. Instead of parasympathetic activation, there will be increased sympathetic activity. Even in chemoreceptor reflex, there will be decrease in the heart rate because of the activation of parasympathetic nervous system. So that finishes the chemoreceptor reflex. The next reflex is the Bainbridge reflex. What happens in this reflex? In this, when there is increase in the right-sided filling pressures, the stretch receptors in the right atrial wall and KO at atrial junction are activated at atrial wall and KO atrial junction are activated. This gives reflex to vagal efferents and from there goes to the cardiovascular center of medulla. This causes inhibition of parasympathetic activity. This results in increased heart rate. And one more thing is the sinoatrial node. Because of stretching of the atrial wall, the SC node is also activated, and this also leads to increase in the heart rate. Changes depend on the underlying heart rate before stimulation. This is Bainbridge reflex. The fourth reflex is Bezold Jarisch reflex. In this reflex, noxious ventricular stimuli. In this, the stimulus is noxious ventricular stimulus, which leads to activation of the chemoreceptors and the mechanoreceptors in the left ventricular wall. Mechanoreceptors in LV wall. This gives off signals to the unmyelinated vagal efferent type C fibers. There will be reflex increase in the parasympathetic tone leading to hypotension, bradycardia, and coronary artery dilatation. This is a cardioprotective reflex. So Bezold-Jarisch reflex is a cardioprotective reflex. This is implicated in physiological response to MI, thrombolysis, revascularization, and syncope. The endogenous ANP or BNP activates on the natriuretic peptide receptors, modulate this Bezold-Jarisch reflex. Bezold-Jarisch reflex is less pronounced in patients with cardiac hypertrophy or atrial fibrillation. In these patients, this Bezold-Jarisch reflex is less pronounced. The next reflex is Valsalva maneuver. What is Valsalva is forced expiration against closed glottis. This forced expiration leads to increased intrathoracic pressure, increased central venous pressure, and decreased venous return. This leads to decreased in the blood pressure and decreased in the cardiac output. At this moment, the baroreceptors activate and there will be sympathetic stimulation leading to increased in the heart rate and increased myocardial contractility. So after the Valsalva, after the closure of glottis, there will be opening of glottis. Here what happens? There will be increased in the venous return. There is increase in the myocardial contractility and increased blood pressure. Again, the baroreceptors activate, leading to parasympathetic efferent pathway stimulation, leading to decreased heart rate and decreased contractility. In Valsalva, there is decrease in the after the changes in the blood pressure, the baroreceptor reflex takes over, and then the changes are according to the baroreceptor reflex. The next reflex is Cushing's reflex. So what happens in Cushing's reflex? In this, with increase in the intracranial pressure, cerebral ischemia at the medullary vasomotor center happens. This leads to cerebral ischemia. This leads to activation of the sympathetic nervous system, leading to increase in the heart rate, increase in the blood pressure, and increased myocardial contractility. This happens to improve the cerebral perfusion. And this increase in the BP leads to activation of baroreceptors, and this causes activation of baroreceptors leading to reflex bradycardia. In Cushing's reflex, first there will be tachycardia followed by bradycardia. And this happens when there is increase in the intracranial pressure. The next reflex is oculocardiac reflex. I think the most important after baroreceptor reflex is the oculocardiac reflex because we commonly see this reflex. So this is seen 30 to 90% during ophthalmic surgery when there is pressure over or pressure applied over eye or traction on the surrounding structures. There will be activation of stretch receptors on the extraocular muscles leading to short from there the reflex goes to short and long ciliary nerves, short and long ciliary nerves, and from there to ophthalmic division of trigeminal nerve at ciliary ganglion, from there to Gasserian ganglion, from there to sensory nucleus of trigeminal nerve in the floor of fourth ventricle, and from there to muscarinic receptors in the heart and vagus nerve. Muscarinic receptors in heart and vagus nerve. This leads to increased parasympathetic tone, leading to bradycardia. So the end point of oculocardiac reflex is bradycardia. There are two more reflexes which are not regularly seen. They are Andrep reflex Bainbridge reflex. This occurs during exercise. What happens during exercise is there will be increased venous return, and this leads to increased right atrial pressures. This leads to increased coronary blood flow. In Bainbridge, if Bainbridge reflex is seen during exercise, this leads to increased coronary blood flow. The ninth reflex is gastrocoronary reflex. As the name mentions, there will be something related to GIT. So when there is distension of stomach because of heavy meal, there will be reflex coronary vasoconstriction is seen. Reflex coronary vasoconstriction. This leads to decreased blood flow, leading to which predisposes to ischemia. So particularly after a heavy meal, there are more chances of ischemia, that is gastrocoronary reflex. That's it for today. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.